Hey everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the third episode of the Blackout Broadcast. We got a few guests on here to dive down the rabbit hole and talk about events that are happening live as we speak. For all of you followers of Survival Dispatch, you know that Chris and his guests talk about rolling blackouts and power shortages and everything that we all get to look forward to as a community of preppers and people that just want to be made aware of what's going on. So thank you for being here today. I'd like to introduce Jeff. Jeff's going to give us some figures on numbers, just where are the numbers at? How much fuel are we burning to keep the power grid going currently? And if we went to all electric, what do we need numbers-wise to make up those numbers? And then we got Mike Sterling, former EOD tech. He's going to talk a little in depth about EMP and how those are caused and the damage they can actually cause to the grid. So I'd like to kick it off with you, Jeff. You were talking to us before we went live about the numbers needed, where we're currently at, and what's needed to make up that difference if we were, in fact, to go all electric. So if you want to kick us off with that.
Yeah, I looked at this initially from just a transportation standpoint and then expanded from there. If you look at the amount of gasoline and diesel that the United States consumes every year, and I went to the DOE website and found it, it's about a little less than 140 billion gallons of gas, 42 billion gallons of diesel. And you look at the energy content of gasoline and diesel and convert it to kilowatt hours, it comes out to 6,383 billion kilowatt hours of electricity equivalent. So that's what you would need to replace gasoline and diesel with electric. That's how much electricity, how much power you need. Now, our total grid, as of this morning when I checked it, 4.3 terawatt hours of production is what we generally put out. 58% of that comes from natural gas and coal. So if you look at those numbers, to go zero carbon and everything's going to be electrified, you're going to need to add 8.85 terawatt hours of wind and solar just to make up for the amount of fossil fuels you're no longer burning.
Oh, yeah, we just tack that on any time.
Yeah, to put that in perspective, in the last 20 years of adding solar and wind to our grid, we have managed to get up to a whopping 0.5 terawatt hours in 20 years. So you're going to need to add another 8.3 terawatt hours in the next 25 or 30 years to hit their goal of, carbon neutral by 2050, which is a nice way of saying anything.
It's a nice way of saying it's an unattainable goal. And I remember going through Google News feed that the trade war with China, that the production of solar panels, where we know that they mainly come out of China, that production isn't going to increase to get us to that demand. From what I'm reading, it's going to decrease.
Well, if you're China, why would you? If you can sell, I can sell fewer at twice the price, why not? Supply and demand.
Exactly. So meeting that goal, it's at this point, it just seems like an unattainable goal.
Well, and let's not forget that those solar power panels are made with electricity generated by burning dirty coal. They burn more coal than the rest of the world combined, and they're not stopping.
And then that brings the other point up, and you were mentioning that you live in a mining town, that the amount of copper that is going to be needed to get us even close to that goal, it's just not possible to get it out of the ground.
Yeah, there was it was actually an article this morning about all the vehicles going electric, and the amount of minerals that are going to be needed, the cobalt and copper and all that. And the author, who was a mathematician who wrote the thing, said that it would be about 600 million tons of copper required to convert everything to electric. And at the current, the value of ore, the amount of copper that's in ore, it would require the removal of 100 billion tons of overburden and waste material from the process. So yeah, you would. I mean, the ore is there. It's in the Andes Mountain and other places, but the amount of work it would take to get to it, and the environmental damage to get to it is, astronomical.
You take one problem and you just add a bunch of new problems.
Yeah, you're just swapping one problem for another.
So the solution, I mean, we all know it, right? We've been saying it forever, is reactivate the nuclear facilities.
Nuclear is the way to go. If you look at the amount of power you can generate from a footprint, a nuclear power plant, they look big, but in the grand scheme of things, they're 20, 30 acres. You would need square miles of solar cells to replace that. And nuclear works 24/7. So that's your spinning reserve when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine.
I mean, that would be here in Colorado, they're shutting down coal plants, and it's stripping the grid as is, while they're passing new bills that all new construction projects have to have electric RTUs, electric ranges. I mean, the system's already taxed, and they're passing laws and bills to force everyone to go electric.
There's a way to kind of more quickly go nuclear that people have talked about, and it's as you decommission these big coal plants, you basically take the coal plant away, but you leave all the electrical infrastructure there, the generators and everything else, and you just replace the thermal coal part of the plant with a small modular nuclear reactor, 500 megawatt reactor. That way you're using the existing infrastructure. You don't have to build new transmission lines. The cooling towers are still there. You're just replacing the thermal, the furnaces with a small nuclear reactor.
And you could match the power output that it was doing with coal with
absolutely
a nuclear.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot that's been going on recently just on micro nuclear reactors for 1 per town kind of stuff. Yeah. They've made a lot of leaps forward on that for miniaturization.
I mean, that's obviously hindsight's 2020, but bringing that up, I mean, that sounds like a minimal cost to retrofit the plant. You're not going ground up. You're using what, 80% existing infrastructure?
Sure. Yeah. In the same footprint.
That graph right there is what's fixing to be retired over the next couple of years. And the amount of coal and gas fired power generation stations that are being shut down far exceeds what's coming into the market for other sources. So we're going to be into rolling blackouts across the country if this is allowed to unfold. Basically, those bars represent what's being retired. So over the next 3 years, 4 years, it's a massive amount of electrical generation disappears, but there's nothing to replace it en masse.
It's just stupid.
There's already scheduled blackouts here in Denver. The gal that does my tattoos was telling me that in the summertime, once a week, her power's off for 8 to 12 hours. So it's already starting here in Denver.
We're like a third world nation.
We say it all the time.
Completely self-inflicted.
So contrast that with Texas, where TXU moved a bunch of power to wind generation in West Texas. And there's been multiple shortages in the past few years since TXU did that. TXU owns the entire grid, and there's like 50 resellers, okay? Not 10 years ago, if you did your laundry and everything at night, you got free electricity during the night because there was overproduction, and the Texas grid doesn't connect to the east or west except for in emergency situations where they need to shunt some power, like California a couple years ago, last summer, whatever it was. So that's a good synopsis of what's fixing to happen to the entire nation, going from a surplus to a deficit and having rolling blackouts. So to be economically crushing.
Yeah, I mean, you're a business and you say, oh yeah, by the way, we can't run our mills on Tuesday because we're gonna have a blackout. It's just stupid.
And I don't know if you guys, the collective, has any information on this. Are big countries like China, India, are other countries having this same power issue, or is it just the United States because they refuse to use nuclear?
Well, Europe is. It's happening to Europe because
they're coal facilities.
Yeah, Europe is just as stupid as we are. I mean, they retired their nuclear power plants and then replaced them with natural gas from Russia, and then said we're not going to burn gas from Russia. Well, you've got
Now
nothing.
what?
And now they're actually, it was ironic because they're going back to coal because they have to have something that spins all the time. And they were actually tearing down a wind farm to get to the coal underneath so they can keep their coal plant going.
The ultimate in irony.
But India and China, they don't have this issue because they're building thermal plants hand over fist. China burns more coal than the rest of the world combined, I think, now. And China is doing, and India is doing massive expansion as well.
I mean, I can't help but just lean on what I've been saying for a decade is it's planned. Everything that's like it's dismantling the United States piece by piece on this massive agenda. And unfortunately, we just have to go along for the ride.
Yeah, it's frustrating and asinine.
I mean, being
the
on the
upside
channel,
is half of those coal-fired power plants were at the end of their service life anyway, and kind of needed to be shut down or rebuilt. So, we're kind of at that point where, we've got to go back to coal. I guess you're going to have to rebuild that plant.
Yeah.
After tearing it down. So, I mean, it being the Blackout Broadcast Survival Dispatch, it's all about getting information out to people so they can be as prepared as possible. So I will do a shout out to Energy that with all these conversations of rolling blackouts, it just increases the need to have portable power stations, small wind units, solar units, battery storage systems, inverters. So big shout out to Energy. Those guys sell some pretty top-notch power storage and generating systems that are fairly priced, in my opinion, with the current market. So anybody watching with the talk about rolling blackouts, you got to get yourself some type of backup power. I mean, everybody's gotta have something to at least keep a light on and a fridge going.
Something like this.
Yeah, there we go.
Well, as a general rule of thumb in Florida, simply because we're hurricane central, although I'm not there right now, is that you have to run your fridge 45 minutes a day and be judicious how much you open and close the door. So you've got to have something that can at least run your fridge for 45 minutes a day at a minimum to keep your food from spoiling. So if you don't have that, it won't take long for it to go
That's
bad.
what that's for.
Actually, 45 minutes at a time every 4 hours.
Recommendation from the state of Florida is 45 minutes a day, and be
They're stupid.
In your door.
Those are people who have lost their groceries before. Here to tell you.
Yeah, that's rough. And it always happens right after you go food shopping too. That's the worst part.
Right.
But so the Blackout Broadcast is bolted on to EMP Pro. EMP Pro is a turnkey provider of EMP shielding devices that protect from general surge protection, lightning, EMPs, and CMEs. And while we got you on here, Mike, I'd like to just have you explain to the folks that don't fully understand what is an EMP and how is an EMP caused? And then we can trail into the effects of an EMP if detonated in the central United States.
Well, for those of you who don't know, EMP is an electromagnetic pulse. Now, let us have a pure scientific definition of what an EMP is. Well, I can't tell you that because all the scientists and all the physicists, they don't agree on it. Period. So you've got so modeling. Yeah, I've done a big deep dive going for the modeling and everything like that because I wanted to do something with you, Chris, and see if we could get a shutdown and the like. But yeah, nobody can seem to agree on any of the science behind a lot of it because a large quantity of the science is theoretical. Small scale EMP has been looked at, but full-born nuclear-driven EMP, nobody has been able to do the actual work on that. Well, let's see. When was the last time somebody popped a nuke in the atmospheres? In the early 70s, wasn't it?
Well, I think the French did some, and the Israelis unofficially did one in the South Atlantic.
Right.
The other thing is you got to have stuff nearby to test it with, too.
Right. Exactly.
You didn't
Now,
set nukes off in the middle of nowhere for good reason.
right. Yeah, weird. So essentially an electromagnetic pulse driven by a nuclear event. You're looking at a HEMP, high altitude electromagnetic pulse. So we're talking popping a nuclear device at approximately 200 to 400,000 feet above ground level. We're talking that the bare minimum envelope on one of those weapons has to be 1.18 megatons. Okay. That is not a small weapon. All right. And it has to be specifically built in a appropriate manner to optimize that, the EMP effect, or you're going to have to go up to like a 5 megaton device in order to get the exact same kind of effect. That is not an easy thing to do. Okay. Hell, just a 1 megaton device, much less a 1.1 or 1.2 or a 5 megaton device, weigh a lot. At this point, there's only 3 countries on the planet that are able to make one of these weapons. We're one of them. And I'm pretty sure everybody here can figure out who the other 2 are. I mean, maybe we're going to, let's throw out, some oddball examples like China and Russia. So first, to make it is not easy. Then to get it where you got to get it to and have it function there without somebody else shooting it down, that's a big thing. That's very difficult. It is not an easy thing. It's a tough issue. Everybody's like, oh, but the North Koreans have one on their satellites. No, the North Korean satellites weigh about 250 pounds. No, they don't. So very interesting effect. The device detonates at this high altitude, and instead of producing a massive blast wave, what it's producing is a large electromagnetic wave that is bending against the Earth's electromagnetic field. And then it essentially winds up turning the electromagnetic field of the Earth back on us slightly. And it causes it pushes a large amount of electromagnetic power down at the surface. Now, that being said, what we wind up with there, sorry, guys, been a day. What we wind up with there at that point is we wind up with large quantities of spurious energy from the atmosphere hitting everything electronic. Now, is that going to destroy everything? No. But one of the biggest problems that we do have is you've got all these power lines right outside, right? And when you have electromagnetic energy like radio waves, and then it's going towards a wire, that wire is a
Conductor.
An antenna.
It's an antenna. Exactly. It is receiving. It is a conductive antenna. It's drawing in all that energy. And guess where that energy's got to go now that it's in that antenna? Through the system. It's going to conduct, because conductor is going to conduct. So you have the possibility of it pushing into your house, possibility of it pushing into your vehicles, anything electronic. The good thing is the dumber the item, the less susceptible we're realizing that those items are. So your cell phones, it's got an antenna and stuff in it, but it's not quite as susceptible as you might think anymore. Especially, depending on how much of the antenna is exposed to the effect. Also, a lot more modern vehicles, we're finding out, any of us around here that used to ride around in a vehicle when, back in the 80s and the 90s, when, every time you'd speed up, the radio would tell you were speeding up because it's getting all kinds of weird noises and stuff in there. Well, we've been putting huge quantities of resistors into these kind of systems to be able to counter a lot of that stuff. So oddly enough, we have actually put quite a few shielding elements into modern vehicles. So we actually thought that they were a lot more susceptible than they actually are these days. one of the things that I do like to say, and I threw this up at Chris, there's a big letter that went to Congress back in, what was it, 2002, 2002, somewhere around there. Anyway, yeah, somewhere around there. Anyway, that was the subject letter for the book one point, or not 1 Point Safe. Sorry, that's an EOD book. My bad. The book 1 Second After. Great books, terrible science behind those books. They show absolutely everything goes to the Stone Age. Doesn't work that way. You have areas of decreasing effect. All right. So in some places, depending on how close you are to an epicenter area, you may be in a burnout zone where absolutely everything, to include you, get fried, or you may be further out on the zone of effect and your computer may get fried, but your cell phone may be just fine.
Yeah, the further you go out, the energy dissipates.
The bulk of the claims in that report to Congress have been proven just flat out wrong.
Yeah.
There were some competing, let's say, agendas behind that. Surprise, surprise, in Congress, right? But you can also avoid EMPs affecting your vehicle if you go old school, like me. So, believe it or not, when I replaced the transmission in that truck, I got rid of the electronic version and went with the one that's just changes gears by a pressure valve. There's zero EMP risk in that truck. So,
yeah,
some of us are still driving trucks from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah, there's something to be said about coils and spark plugs, but there's another aspect of this that people got to consider, and that is the frequency of the EMP. If it is high microwave, high energy, high frequency microwaves can hit silicon and set up eddy currents. And eddy, because silicon's a semiconductor, and then it hits it, it can cause eddy currents. And if the eddy currents are strong enough, they can burn out the transistors and everything that's in there. But they have to be exposed to it. It has to go through the through the semiconductor. So, but if the frequency of the EMP is lower than that, it's probably not going to affect them at all.
Yeah, and that's the problem with EMPs and trying to model them or actually trying to figure out what it is they're going to do. There are a billion variables that are going to change absolutely everything.
Well, there was a case in I think it was the late 90s where the Russians were testing a high powered radar system up near the Arctic Circle, up that area. And at the same time, in the same area, the Swedes were testing a Gripen fighter. And the Russians actually shot down the Gripen just with the microwave because it fried the electronics on the aircraft, and the pilot had to eject because he couldn't control anything because it was a fly-by-wire. There were no hydraulic backup systems, and so they lost an airplane. Went, we have some hardening to do, and they had to go back and look at that and redesign a huge part of the avionics in that aircraft.
So was that done with just a large satellite focused on the aircraft and sending those microwaves?
Yeah, it was a ground radar system for detecting airplanes, and it's sending out a big powerful radar beam, and then it hits something and comes back. Well, it hit the Gripen, but it hit it with enough the cross-sectional power that, and of course the airplane becomes the antenna, and it actually propagated through and burned out the flight control system. So, but you can, it's just like you can hold you can hold a fluorescent light bulb and then reach over near a Tesla coil and the light bulb will light up. There's energy all in the air. It's just how much, what density, and what frequency.
So with the EMP, Mike, it's with that decreasing effect. So an EMP would not necessarily knock out the whole country, but it would definitely take large sections of it and put it in disarray. Yeah.
So if you look at the scenario that they talked about in 1 Second After, it's kind of a situation. I think they said that they popped like 4 of them over the country, something like that. And you're going to have burnout zones where, under each weapon, you're going to have a burnout zone that is going to be like maybe like half the size of Georgia, where all electronics are fried. But then it's going to be, reducing effect coming from there. Yeah, honestly, if they really wanted to really jack up the country, they would need 5 or 6 of them at least over the country. I mean, honestly, popping one is going to make a hell of a mess. It really is. I mean, the sheer volume of chaos that it's going to cause is going to be ridiculous. But you're not gonna knock out a lot of the hardened stuff anyway. So, yeah.
So still a need
I got a question for you, Mike. Is the only threat of an EMP from a nuclear device, or can they be created by other kind of man-made weapons or anything kind of more like focused energy? Like they didn't want to blanket an area if it's too difficult to get one into the atmosphere to do that. Is there a way they can target specific power grids and with other kinds of technology that might have the same effect?
Yeah, maybe that radio frequency Jeff was talking about, could that be mounted to a satellite with tech now and shot down through the atmosphere and take out a power station?
I am going to work really hard to not go to jail right now. I'm going to simply say, yes, you can have a small area of effect non-nuclear device.
Noted.
Or
When
as
you
we
say
would call
small,
them,
like what's the scale compared
explosively
to?
driven flux compression generators.
We're not going to
It's
talk
not
about
classified anymore.
No, actually, those are the inefficient ones, Jeff.
Yes, I know there are more efficient ones. but
Yeah. We're
better.
looking at an area like football stadium size.
Yeah.
So you could target a large power plant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could schwack a power plant. I mean, you don't need to target the power plant. You target the transfer station just outside the power plant. Power's got to come out of there.
Yeah.
That is a whole lot softer of a target than the plant itself.
Yeah, a thermal plant is, in most part, a mechanical system.
Yeah.
Well,
It doesn't really
that's
become electronic till after it leaves the generator.
so. I mean, so EMP, it wouldn't be as widespread as we were thinking.
No.
But then
Now you are going to get damage. Don't think that you're not going to get some kind of damage. And I mean, God, the effect just from one device on the power grid. I mean, you got cascading failure moving long distances on that.
But if you look at geopolitically, the reason for doing it, okay, you want to cripple an enemy, but you tap off a nuke over someone's country and they have nukes too. The fact that you tapped it off at 200,000 feet as opposed to 50,000 feet is going to be semantics. You've just hit somebody with a nuclear weapon. They're probably going to hit you back if they can.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like bioweapons. You know, it's kind of a zero-sum game. Yeah. Yeah. You're ripping the Band-Aid off for everybody.
You know, it's like if someone shot you and they say, hey, I only shot you in the arm. You're going to go, well, okay. No, if you have a gun, you're going to shoot back.
Yeah.
So we could segue into, and this is the big subject the Blackout Broadcast has been talking about, is the sun. The sun can generate a naturally caused EMP, CME, coronal mass ejection, large plasma filament ripping away from the sun and hitting the Earth's atmosphere and creating that same effect with the atmosphere, which would knock out electronics. That would be more widespread than an EMP. So yes. we lean heavily on the CME, that with the solar maximum supposedly peaking July of 2025. That's what we lean on for everyone to be prepared. Anyone who follows space weather, the CME activity has increased. The sunspot sizes are massive, and a lot of them are Earth facing at this point. And again, that's where EMP Pro comes in, is the ability to come in, turnkey, protect your panel, your generator, inverters, superchargers, vehicles, and hopefully soon to be transformer units. I know we were talking to Andrew over at EMP Shield, and they're about 6 months out, 5 months at this point from having a EMP Shield unit that can mount right to a transformer. And if we could take $1 trillion of the 20 trillion that went over to Ukraine, they'll never tell you the real money, but we could take $1 trillion of that and start to insulate the third world power grid we have, we'd be much better off here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, what's Sean, was it Sean or Jed? What was the timeline to replace all the transformers in the United States if they all went out. You're muted, guys.
I think Chet said it was like at least 4 to 6 years.
Which is probably more like 10 to 14, because
Well, we don't build them anymore.
yeah,
Yeah.
most of them come out of Mexico. And if you think they're going to give theirs away when they come off the assembly line,
Well, and
Right.
the big ones in the power substations, you know, some of those have 1, 2, 3 years of lead time.
Yeah.
You want one.
and
They're
that's
not
a fully
off-the-shelf
operational
item.
factory.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
not to mention, I mean, if we get hit hard, all of northern Mexico, well, probably the northern 2/3 of Mexico are going to get wrapped up in that as well.
Sure.
Not to mention the entire southern half of Canada is going to get wrapped up in it.
The industrial part of Canada.
Right.
It's the important piece.
Yeah, exactly. And after that, probably our best option for getting these replacement components would have to be Australia.
Yeah, or Japan.
Yeah.
Well, and so that leads into if all of the airplanes and the cargo vessels that move all of this stuff globally, if those companies don't start looking at protecting all of their electronics on these vessels with EMP shielding device, it's just all paperweights, just big floating pieces of metal at that point.
Yeah.
You know, if only they could use wind to move those things. You know, we might be onto something here with this. You know,
Wait, how did our ancestors move around?
Oars.
Obviously, Vikings, they were all rowing.
Galleys. Triremes, you know.
You live to serve this ship. Row well and live.
That's right.
So there are technologies that exist to insulate, and it just brings me back to, by design, they're siphoning money out of the United States, like we've never seen. I mean, it's the largest movement of money that the world has ever seen, and the United States is footing the bill.
Yeah.
So right now, the only thing that I can pitch and say that I can help with on my end is we can protect your homes, your cars, your RVs, and your solar arrays, generators. We have the means to do that, and we have the means to do that quickly. So anybody watching who wants more information, you can go to EMPpro.com, or you can call one of our team members at 833-EMP-PRO4.
Got to take care of yourself, or you can take care of your neighbors.
I mean, and I've said this in the other 2 episodes, a large number of the people watching right now, they have backup power, they have solar panels, they have backup generators, but they don't have EMP or CME protection on these devices. So you spend all this money insulating yourself, your home, and we get hit with an EMP or a CME. All of that was in vain because none of it's going to work. So you spend $5-10 grand on all this backup system, you might as well spend $1,000 and put an EMP shielding device on it, and at least your stuff's going to work in the event that you need it to work.
Yeah.
Chris,
Yeah,
you got to chime in on that?
Well, I just add one thing, you know, that our primary residence is in Florida, and we have a insurance catastrophe happening in Florida. For many, many years, contractors, particularly in the roofing industry, ripped off insurance companies because your premiums are based on your zip code. So not going too deep into it, what's happened is a lot of insurance companies have left the state of Florida. They've jacked up the premiums, sometimes 4 or 5 times what they were previously. If your insurance gets dropped and you can't get insurance, then the bank makes you get it through them at around 5 times what you paid previously. So there are people who were paying $1,000 a year for insurance not that many years ago are now paying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year, and it's crushing them. And one of the things that they're doing as a result of all of this is if you buy an EMP shield device and you install it yourself and you are not a licensed electrician, you have any type of electrical fire, your policy, at least in Florida, is going to be toast. They are not going to pay out anything on that. So I would just caution people that if they want an EMP shield to protect their home, make sure that you get a licensed electrician like you guys with a certificate of insurance, with liability insurance, all the stuff that goes with that. So that your insurance company doesn't say, oh, you took a lightning strike, or, oh, there was a surge came through the grid and it set your place on fire. Gee, that's too bad because you have this device connected to your panel and you can't prove that a licensed electrician put it there. So
And
it's
that's
a major concern in Florida.
And that's one of the benefits of doing business with EMP Pro is your terminology got one throat to choke. We vet anyone we send in, make sure they have a COI, certificate of insurance, that they have an electrical license. And when the project's complete, we will give a letter of attestation stating that a licensed and insured electrician put the device in. So that would
It's important. This is not something that you want to try and cut corners on and save money on. There's lots of DIY stuff that's okay, but not when it comes to something like this.
And that situation's only gonna increase, right? I mean, here in Colorado, the hail damage, the hail that comes through here, one just came through about a week ago, and the insurance companies are getting walloped with totaled vehicles. So the insurance across the board is just going through the roof for all different weather events.
Well, and so, just because I've spent a significant portion of my time in North Texas and dealt with all kinds of hailstorms, here's the problem is they send roofing contractors door to door and say, hey, Mike, would you like us to have a look at your roof? And you're like, no, man, it's okay. I don't have any leaks. And they're like, well, you know what? Everybody in your neighborhood's getting a new roof that you're going to be paying for because your premium's going up. Are you sure you don't want us to look at it? So now you're in a situation of, well, I'm going to be paying for it anyways. Go ahead. That's what got us into trouble in Florida, and that's what's now happening in other states. Just all you got to do is see what's happening in Florida as a harbinger of what's fixing to happen in other states.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. We had the hailstorm come through in Arvada, the other house that my wife and I own, and 2 days later, the roofing door knockers, we have you on the map. We can prove that the hail hit your house. They go up, give all the photo reports, and they just say, just file the claim, and you don't have to pay anything other than your deductible.
Liars.
But we all end up paying for it, right? And just like on a macro level, what a lot of people don't realize is that General Electric was the largest insurance underwriter for the Twin Towers. When the Twin Towers went down, if you look at people's premiums in 2002, 2003 for everything from their cars to their home, everything, they all spiked like a son of a gun because GE paid out 60% of the insurance on the Twin Towers. So the more claims like that happen, it affects everybody because they just spread it across the entire gamut of their business, right? It's the only business you can't lose money at because whatever they pay out this year, they tack it onto premiums next year plus their gross margin.
Oh, yeah, the insurance companies never lose.
Never.
So
only we lose as the consumer.
Oh yeah, it all gets put back on us, and that it can segue right back to all the money going to Ukraine. Who's paying for that? It's that debt is tagged to every American that's paying taxes.
Actually, our grandchildren are paying that debt.
Yeah,
right.
So
either that or go bankrupt.
Can a country go bankrupt? Like what happened? A country goes bankrupt.
Argentina's done it 3 times.
Yep, absolutely.
Look at Zimbabwe.
Well, the thing is, we have it in our Constitution that we have to pay our debts.
So everyone else gets to file bankruptcy except for the U.S. I mean, that seems like a fraud.
Pretty much.
People in D.C. aren't following the Constitution anyway.
Yeah, they're shitting all over it and wiping their ass with it.
Yeah.
So I mean, if there's a lot going on, we don't have enough power to cover this movement of green energy. Number one, and they're still pushing it without a solution. And we have the big light bulb in the sky, Bob, big orange ball, that's spitting off CMEs at a higher frequency every day that we all have to worry about. So we need to insulate ourselves from that. And that's where we come in as EMP Pro, the Blackout Broadcast. Would love to chat on another episode about the microgrid solution, which that technology already exists. Small wind units, 5 by 5 by 5, 4 foot tall mast, takes a wind load of 5 miles an hour and can produce at 15 miles an hour. And if it's 10, it'll produce at 30 and so on. And this thing will run in 100-mile-an-hour sustained wind, which that could be a hurricane wind, Chris, down where you're at. You could still be pumping out electricity in the middle of a hurricane. So there are solutions. It's just getting the boneheads in Washington to keep the money in the country and start insulating our system.
Yeah.
Whoa, hang on.
We need to have an offline conversation on those wind units because something that other states wouldn't be aware of. Jeff would be because he lived in Florida, but we have commercial roofing systems that are called wind vented. And so it's not a waterproof roofing system. It's an airtight roofing system. So the faster the wind blows, it spins these one-way vents and literally sucks the entire roofing system down to the building. Comes with 160-mile-per-hour riders on them for your insurance, but each one of them is like a turbine that, just like your wind generation, your electric generation, that'd be
Why hasn't anybody tapped that?
That
Yeah,
offline conversation. Don't give
that's
it
what
away.
I know I know the guy who holds the patent on the technology. That's the only reason I know anything on the subject. It's really interesting technology.
You know, any race car has, you know, they increase, downdrafts on the car on purpose, you know, and they design it to where it basically sucks the car down to the track for maximum traction.
I wonder if that's where he got the idea. He's probably a NASCAR fan.
Huh?
The guy that invented it is probably a NASCAR fan. That's
NASCAR,
where
Formula One, something like that. Yeah.
Actually, he is.
So. Now, who made those 5x5 units? Who makes those?
So it's a private company, and they've been working with a company called Centura Health. They've already proven the model. Part of their bolt-on is they have to put solar on any project they do. They actually have a big project going in Wyoming, where it was an old coal mine, and the owner of the land had the option of decommissioning the mine, which would have cost millions of dollars, or somehow turn it into a energy producing piece of land. So they're bringing in hundreds of these units and putting them all on the land and tying them all in, and they're going to start generating subcontracted power generation. So I'd love to share some of that information offline and get on another podcast and talk about it, because it literally is the solution to not having enough electricity. For the fraction, what is it, $10 billion to build a power plant roughly? For $1 billion, you could put these units all over existing real estate, the top of roofs, and literally snap into the power, and you're creating clean power subcontracted. And if you're in a state like Colorado, I mean, the wind blows all the time. If the wind doesn't blow, that's odd. So there's enough wind up here where we could literally sustain the whole city off of these units.
Yeah, they're small enough and not uglies, not sticking up 300 feet in the air.
Those white wind units, it's a novelty. Like, have you seen the boneyards where the overhead pictures of where these things are going? You got.
Well, yeah, because they can't recycle the blades.
They've come up with a method. I actually work up in those areas up in Wyoming, and they came up with a method for the blades. You know, the big wind fences that you get all over the place up in that area, or should I say snowdrift fences?
Yeah, there's drift fences, right?
So they're always wood,
right?
Well, now what they're doing is they're taking those old fan blades and they're starting to replace where they're putting up fences using those old fan blades.
They're just sticking a fan blade where the wood used to be.
Well, you know, where the fence sections are, they're building the fences out of the blades.
Just keep that
solid blades, or are they cutting the blades into chunks?
I think they're cutting them into chunks, but
okay.
Yeah.
That's a little bit. I was like, they just like taking the blade and just sitting it on some racks.
Well, you could do that with old tires too.
I mean, would you put it past them?
No. Well, they have landfills and they just stack them in there and then bury them with bulldozers.
Well, why not? We used to do it with chemical weapons. Why not?
Just bury everything. Let the next generation deal with it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. The entire 20th century, let me tell you. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job.
Or dump it off of ships into the middle of the ocean.
Don't get me started.
There are a couple people who've done studies out there that actually show that the energy that's required to make those large wind turbines is more than they'll ever generate during their lifespan. Now, whether or not that's the case, I don't know.
Surprise me. Well, if you take into account the amount of concrete that goes into those things, and people don't think about it, but if you have something that's 300 feet high, it's got to be anchored to the ground very, very well.
Yeah.
And that usually means 100 tons of concrete or so. And concrete is made by, you get limestone, you heat it up really, really hot in an oven, where you burn coal or natural gas. Yeah, I mean, everything in this energy is just consumes shit tons of energy.
Everything's about calories.
Yes,
Where are you going to get the calories from?
It's thermodynamics. You can't get it. You can't win. You can't break even, and you can't get out of the game. Those are the three rules of thermodynamics, as my college professor told me on day one.
So essentially, we got to start mining asteroids because it's easier, right? That's what Elon's going for. Just grab an asteroid and pull it into Earth's orbit. We don't have to worry about nothing, and we'll just pick away at it and bring it back.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, so you have an asteroid that weighs, I don't know, 8-9 million metric tons, and it's circling, and then it starts to fall out of orbit. Oops.
What could go wrong?
Could possibly go wrong. I mean,
that's when you start taking bets. Is it going to destroy a city by direct impact or via tsunami when it hits the water?
I'm going to go with all of the above.
Yeah. I think for those of us that remember that, Thundar the Barbarian showed us exactly why that's a bad idea.
So I mean, we're all in the pickle together, but at the end of the day, being informed, knowledge is power. That's why we all do this, right? We get on the screen and stare at a camera and throw some information out. Would love to touch on the microgrids if I could get you guys to come back on here in the future. And
sure.
I have to talk to Kane. He's the owner of the company, and ask him exactly what I can talk about and what I can disclose that wouldn't hurt their business at all. But the solutions are there. We have the EMP CME protection, very small device, simple to install, and reasonably priced. So anybody watching, again, EMPpro.com, 833-EMP-PRO4 for more information. These videos we posted on our YouTube channel as well as Chris's platform, Survival Dispatch. We thank everybody for watching and would love to get you guys back on again. And I'd love to dive down that microgrid rabbit hole and just start to get that buzzword out, microgrid. Until fusion becomes a thing, we either got to go nuclear or microgrid. So we got to pick an option.
Or both.
Yep. I'm still waiting on you guys to come out to my place and put in a hybrid system out here.
What do you need? What do you need, Mike? You want some EMP protection to start?
We'll talk about it again.
All right.
He's protecting against his own EMPs that he creates by accident.
You know what? I resent that. I'm not smart enough.
That's why I said by accident.
Oh, well, okay, there could be that. There could be that.
Hey, well, you know, that's how the best stuff's created, right? A lot of the shit we got, somebody had an oops, and now we got the telephone.
Yeah.
Something blew up and their phone went off. Hey, we might be able to use this. Well,
hey, Mom, I think I split an atom.
Hey, radar was discovered because they were shooting radio waves across a canal, and a ship came between them, and they lost the signal. And they went, "Hey, wait a minute, where'd the signal go? Maybe it went back the way it came. Hey, let's see how that works out." That's how they found radar.
So was that radar in general or sonar?
No, radar. It was above ground. It was in Britain, and they were actually doing a radio experiment and across a canal, and a big ship went by, and it blocked their signal. And then they said, "Wait a minute! If the signal's not going to the other side, where in the hell's it going?" And then they set it up to where they could say, well, "Okay, let's have a receiver and a generator, and then we'll see what happens." And then you can measure the time delay and everything else. They went, "Hey, this
air traffic control conception date."
Yes, interception.
And people still don't listen to
bombers.
No. So I really do appreciate you guys coming on here last notice and chatting with us. There was just great information all around, and I look forward to having that microgrid conversation. I'll see what I can and can't talk about per Kane, and love to jump all over that because it's a solution. It's an actual solution that can be implemented very quickly for short money when you look at what's being spent on absolutely nothing right now.
Yeah.
Hey, and not gonna lie, I'll tell you what, they made a believer out of me when we did the testing on that thing. And if you guys, I don't know if you guys have got that video, you might want to link it to this, of our testing. Wow. Yeah, we're talking, what was it he put through there? 320,000 volts. And even
I believe on 800,000 on the last test, I believe
it was way more than any EMP is ever going to produce. Right. You're going to max out on an enhanced EMP, which is purely theoretical.
Yeah.
maxing out at 200,000 volts.
Yeah, the one the video's on is 400,000 volts from Mark's generator, electrostatic discharge, but then the second test was 800,000 volts, and we haven't put out all the footage from that because there were no problems with the EMP shield, but maybe some personnel issues.
What was the? How's he generating that? What's he using?
We should probably not talk. Well, he ran a spark gap generator.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if he had a Van.
Well, 20,000 volt transformer with 20,000 volt transformer with 20 capacitors, all charged at 20,000 volts. There's your 400,000 volts. They all release it at the same time. And ESD, electrostatic discharge, is exactly what an EMP is. It has the same wavelengths and everything. So then he went and he did 800,000, and Mike actually stopped him from going any further at that point in time because Steve was 25 feet away from the setup. He had a fiberglass rod that was 25 feet long. He was standing on a tire on the ground, and he flicked the switch and he still got hit. So
he is lucky to have not become a big red splatter.
That's why I said, dude, don't. We love the testing, we appreciate it, but it's not worth dying for.
Oh,
my government labs spend millions upon millions of dollars on remote setups.
Right. Oh my God.
So Steve is currently shopping for a Tesla coil that'll do 1.2 million volts.
Oh, geez.
He's hell-bent determined that he's gonna expose the EMP shield device to over 1 million volts because the Carrington event is estimated to be somewhere just under 1 million volts. So I have no doubt it's going to survive, because while we may have the only footage of a live test of EMP shield devices, there are some videos out there. There's one where there's a pump station that got hit by lightning, blew the EMP shield off the wall, but there was zero damage to the network itself. So it did what it was supposed to do. It just didn't repeatedly protect it like the stuff that we've done at 400,000 volts. So
it was an old copper fuse instead of a circuit breaker.
Whatever. Sacrificial anode is a sacrificial anode.
That's right.
Steve Yost is very stubborn, and as much as Mike pushes back against him on this, Steve Yost is hell-bent determined he's going to do it. So,
dude, I got OSHA certifications to maintain, man.
So are we all going to be going? Let's just agree now. Are we all going to go to Steve's funeral?
Hopefully not. He needs to dip himself in rubber. He needs to just spray his whole body down with that canned rubber before he does anything.
Look, Flex Shield.
He looked like the Blue Man Group, like the whole.
Real quick, guys, and you've probably seen this, Mike. So this was an article put out by Homeland Security in 2019. It's an article they put out.
Yep.
So you've seen that. So
I have seen that.
So this just proves the point of why, as a country, we need to start to implement shielding, right? Homeland Security put out the article as an executive order telling businesses and civilians that, hey, you need to do X, Y, and Z to insulate, which means they've already been insulating for the last 10 years, if not longer, from an event like this. So when this stuff comes out, they know something we don't know, but there's an executive order on it. All the more reason why we should start to insulate ourselves first, but then start pushing our government to provide some money to do this on a large scale.
Agree. Yeah. And that's a solid document too. I went through that, and I understood most of the words in it. But and I think that's the big problem with the early 2000s version. They went straight up to Congress, and Congress did the normal. They said, harumph, harumph, harumph. I didn't get a harumph out of that guy. And, like most politicians, that was all they did. They harumphed. So,
Well, I mean, we could use the analogy of an EMP doesn't necessarily affect the smaller units, and the same thing, information doesn't really affect the smaller brains. They just.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good thought process. Yeah.
Before anybody's allowed to take office anywhere in the United States, they should have to pass Economics 101 and Intro to Physics.
They'll cheat.
If they can't pass it, they shouldn't be able to take office.
They'd cheat. They'd all cheat. We know this because they're politicians.
It's too easy nowadays. But so there's information out there on why we need to do this, and we touched on a lot of it today. So I appreciate all of your time and being on the show. I'm looking forward to chat with you guys again here in the future. As always, Chris, thank you for for being here with us and everything that you do in the background to get the Blackout broadcast out to your followers. We really appreciate all the time and energy spent on it. Sean,
So
Jed, you guys got anything you want to add?
No, it was
let me
nice
just
meeting
say one
everyone
thing.
though.
There,
And you guys.
Yeah,
there's
same.
there's a lag always from the back end of YouTube, like the studio portion versus what you see on the front end. Sometimes it's upwards of 48-hour delay. So just so you know, you peaked at 1,245 concurrent viewers on this last minute live, without a whole lot of forewarning. Not too shabby.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool.
All right. Well, I appreciate everybody's time. Chris, thanks. And we look forward to seeing you all in the next episode of the Blackout broadcast.
Peace.
There you go. That's done. It's no longer on.
Awesome.
God, Jed, you talk